Om Shanti. Good evening and welcome everyone. This is the almost, I think, the second to last of our Garden of Virtue series that we've been doing all summer. And as many of you know who have been with us for a while, we consider virtues to be the spiritual flowers of the garden of the soul. And so we're always cultivating our virtues, and especially at this time in the world, always, but especially now, it seems more important than ever that we understand what our inherent qualities are, our virtues, and that we know how to enact them. We know how to embody them, to experience them ourselves and express them in the world. And we have a half-hour, 40-minute conversation together, the three of us, and then Q&A on the chat box for those that are just joining us for the first time. And I'm Judy here at the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Center. I know most of you. Terry Crawford is with us, an anchor on this evening, a wonderful, consistent participant in the Monday evening talks for the summer. Thank you, Terry. And Leela is just back from about a month away. So she's in quarantine and we're getting the best of her in a concentrated form in lockdown. So Leela Robertson, who many of you would know, but maybe many would not. So welcome, Leela. Thank you for coming. Tonight's theme is humility, as you would have heard in the meditation we listened to before. And I find of all the virtues, it's in some ways, I feel like it's the most misunderstood or maybe the hardest to understand. So I'm really looking for this evening's conversation. People have got all kinds of ideas about what humility is and often a reaction to it. So let's see if we can get to the bottom of, well, what is it really? And how beautiful is that? And how much do we want that? And activating that in ourselves. So I don't know if you two have talked. Normally we don't speak to each other at all about this. We just show up. And so it's fresh and new and we don't know what each other has been thinking about all day. But we do know that each of us has been thinking about it all day. So that's means for really good conversation for us. So I think we'll start with you, Leela, if that's all right. And Terry, then we'll over to you, Terry, as is our sort of our way, if that's okay. So Leela, share with us, please, your experiences and your thoughts about humility.
Well, Judy, to start with, I would agree that it actually took me by surprise a bit that, okay, how would I express the essence of humility? So I did have to think about it a bit today. My first thought was, it's not just the absence of ego. Sometimes as we think like in peace is the absence of war. So I think that is a part of being humble, but I also feel like humility is a very, very full virtue. And it feels like it has an embodiment within it of many other virtues. So I just parted down into four that I felt were the primary ones, but you know, I'm not an expert on humility. I just spent some time today really trying to get a grasp on the essence. So I would say self-respect is crucial. And I can speak a bit more on that. Truth. So I think self-respect and truth are sort of the foundation of humility. And then from that foundation, there's this natural flow of love and grace.
It's a winning combination.
Yeah, and I liked the commentary that you used to introduce the theme tonight, where you said humility is respecting anything or anyone that comes in front of us. So I think that is also an expression of self-respect. So when we're really based in that truth of our own identity as spiritual beings, it's a natural tendency of the soul, I think, to have respect for everything and everyone. So there's no more confusion, there's no more resisting, there's no more trying to react or even respond from an ego or an I sense of self, but from a spiritual sense of self, we allow. And it's just this very natural allowing without the ego. I think we really, I mean, personally, I feel like ego really isn't part of the equation. So I know that's a huge deal, like, you know, the topic of ego and how we actually try to start to chip away at ego within ourselves. But it really feels to me like one way that I've practiced this is to be an observer and to really kind of fall in love with that posture of observing yourself, your internal workings, your thoughts, your feelings, and then from there it becomes easier to observe the world around you. But first, of course, it's always the internal observing. So I think in my spiritual journey, I would say that was a starting point to really not only understand that, I like to use the word posture of observation, but actually really, really enjoy it and to really know the benefit within it. So I think that would be something I would say has brought me a lot closer to humility.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Thank you, Leela, because I think we can explore this, you know, to define something as what it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I think we do have to address the topic of ego tonight at some point in
Yes.
relation to this virtue in particular. So thank you for raising that right at the start.
Mm-hmm.
Terry, how about you? What have your thoughts been today?
Oh, there's been so many. I don't know if I can encapsulate it all, but I really liked what Leela said about the four aspects: self-respect, truth, love, and grace. I think that that really says a lot about humility. And one of the things I did was I listened to a class, just a very short video that was done by Debbie Janke in 2011. And she said, and I just thought this is just so beautiful. Humility brings beauty. Humility finishes ego. And it leads to success. And humility is actually the practical experience of being an embodiment of truth. And there are many virtues that work along with humility, but patience and sweetness are two. And where there is truth, because of humility, patience, sweetness, and maturity, you are able to experience divinity. And I thought, yes, that's true, because if I don't put myself in the way of something, then I can truly experience and can be respectful to myself, can be respectful to others, and I can be an embodiment of love, because I really do believe that love is a part of humility. Humility is really about adjusting or accommodating or accepting other people, other people's perspectives, other people's ways of doing things. And I can only do that if I'm not attached to the outcome, which actually is ego, right? When I have that attachment. And when I want somebody else to change, right? I usually do that through force in some way. I either try to control the situation, or I'm reactive. Maybe I get a little loud. maybe I criticize, but that's all ego. Those are methods that ego used because I think I'm right. But if I am comfortable and confident in who I am, if I am really confident in the knowledge that I have, then I don't need to be a show-off. And I don't need to let others see that. I need to help others grow. And so to me, that's also part of humility.
Mhm. I remember in the Living Values program, and Leela would know this, I think it's in the 3 to 5-year-old book, you know, this educational program to catch values that the BK created some years ago. And I remember that the definition for humility for the 3 to 5 or 5 to 7, the young ones, was I know my value, so I don't need to boast.
Yeah, that's true.
And I thought, well, doesn't that just capture it?
Yeah.
You know, that captures the aspect of self-respect that Leela, you're speaking about, is that I just know my value. I have this quiet inner sense of my own worth.
Yeah.
So I don't need praise. I don't need a recognition. I don't need to boast, which we would associate with ego. So the two seem very, as you were saying, Leela, very closely connected, the self-respect, and what you're saying, Terry, just knowing, you know, who I am, knowing my own worth and value.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Isn't that sweet? I mean, how simple, you know, it's
Very
know my value, so I don't need to boast. It works for me as an adult.
Yeah.
I think too, oh, go ahead, Terry.
Leela, you go ahead.
Well, I just think, you know, if you look at today's world, we've been so programmed to be reactionary through, you know, technology and in the workplace. And it just seems that we're rewarded if we are very reactionary. So again, sort of allowing the ego to take precedent over everything else. So I think it really is a retraining that we have to do to say that is not my true self when I want to react and when I have an opinion and when I have fear and when I have to intervene and interject and interrupt. And I think, you know, again, the power of meditation for me, like it's really been so crucial for me to have that space in the self, not to do that reactionary dance. So, you know, I think our world that we're in right now really trains us from a very young age to step into ego. And so it's really nice to hear like something like the Living Values starting from a very young age, that if you value yourself, your true self, then you don't have to get on that treadmill of being someone who is responding from an ego place.
Yeah, and you know, ego's got the two faces as we understand it here, right? I mean, ego is, as we've come to understand through Raj Yoga, is just a false image of self. So whether that false image of myself is bigger, better, superior, which we would call arrogant, or if that false sense of self is small, not good enough, you know, that the two faces of ego, the better than, worse than, neither of which is true or accurate spiritually. And so defining ego that way makes it quite simple. It's like, I'm either feeding this or that, or I'm in my inherent natural sense of self-worth as a soul, as a soul, my true identity. And that's just a quiet beingness that doesn't require broadcasting of any kind, right?
Yes. And it's such a sweet, it feels like such a sweet place to be in relationship with oneself and with others. And it just feels to me like it's a very natural state of the soul. You know, I don't think it's a conscious, like, you know, love and grace. When I think of grace, I feel like it's allowing the flow of life, you know, in us and around us just to happen. And I don't feel like it's not about a conscious choice. It's just about, if you're in your true self-respect, these things will just happen naturally, because that is just the law of the spiritual law, that these things happen, and we don't have to really do anything but just be in our self-respect and allow others their own self-respect and the life itself to flow in its own way. So it feels to me like it's a very sweet, sweet spiritual place to land. Yeah.
The grace is a lovely word, isn't it? Lovely addition to that. Tara, any more thoughts from you on that?
Well, I was thinking that, when you're in your true self-respect and you know who you are, and you know that you're a soul, and you know others are souls, well, then really you're no different than that other person or that other being, right? So because you have more money doesn't make you better. Because you have different knowledge, that doesn't make you better. We're all equal. And if we come at it from that perspective, which we would call soul consciousness, then I can be an authority in my own right. Now, I'm not an authority on everything. There are all kinds of people that know way more than me, and some that don't know as much of me as me about certain things, right? But if I'm an authority in my own right, and I see that, which is self-worth, which leads to self-worth, then I can also be soft and humble, because that respect that I have gives me an equal balance of that authority. I have nothing to prove. I have nothing to prove, and I can be happy with what I am or who I am and what I know. And I can be happy to give it to somebody else that knows more. So I know what my own talents and gifts are, and I'm happy to demonstrate those, but I don't do it in an arrogant way or in a I'm better than you way. It's just I offer it because it's what I do. And we get all tied up with false ego, kind of, and false ego trying to appear humble when really we're not. And so I think humble sometimes in the outer world, because it's misused in that way, it gets a bad rap.
Agreed. And yeah. I think to your point also, I think we have to be really careful that our value is not based on what we know. And it's not based on my talents, it's not based on my skills, it's not based on anything, it's just the mere fact of my existence.
Yes.
Right? And so, and that's valuable. That's just an inherently beautiful thing. When Brother Yogesh was here, and some of you who are listening now would have met him, he's quite a remarkable soul. He's very, he plays the straight man always. He tells a good joke because he never laughs at his own jokes, unlike me. But he was here once, and I remember him saying, he was talking about humility, and he said, flat, without any smirk on his face, he said, I'm the most humble person in the room. And I remember laughing because it seems such an outrageous thing to say. And then, you know what? It was only today that I finally understood why that's funny. I love that he said it. I've bugged him about it endlessly over the years. Every time I see him, I'll say, you're the most humble person I know. And he'll laugh and I'll laugh. But I realized today what makes that so, what makes it stick, what makes a natural sort of laughter to it is that I think it exactly captures the paradox, the essential paradox of humility. In that if you knew you were it, you wouldn't be it.
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and Daddy Yankee says, of all the virtues, humility is the greatest, because if you had all the other virtues, but you were arrogant about them, then you would annul them. You would, they would lose their value.
Yeah.
So in a way, I don't know that we can experience humility, which is, I think, why Leela beginning with these 4 other virtues is probably a really good way to start, because I think the experience for the self is, as we've said, it's just a quiet sense of worth, period. And if I think of that as humility, then I'm not in it. I'm not, already I'm looking at myself, which is ego, the outside view of self. Does that make any sense?
Maybe there's a vibration of humility
Mm-hmm.
that you can sense or you can experience. So maybe that encompasses those virtues. I feel like we have the word, we have some concept of it, right? And I feel like maybe we can experience it through, maybe a vibration or a feeling. I feel like it's very full. Like that's when I started saying, it's not the absence. It is the absence of ego, but it feels like it's a very full virtue, like full of many qualities. But it's interesting to think, well, if you're actually in that quality of humility, then maybe you don't have any consciousness of it.
Right, I think so. But then you have those feelings that you're describing of being full, of being, complete with your own qualities and an abundance. So therefore no deficit, therefore no need to draw attention to yourself to get something from the world.
And I think too, there's something that gets expressed through humility that you would experience, like the love, the acceptance, the surrender, the allowing. Like it just feels like you would experience that. It's an interesting, I've not thought of it like that. Like, do you actually experience humility while you're being humble? It's a good paradox.
Well, I thought that's what made his joke funny, is that, and I couldn't figure it out until today. It hit me. Oh, well, that's the paradox of humility. I don't know. That's kind of what I got from it. That Terry, you raised the idea of false humility, and I was thinking this morning the word obsequious. I don't know, I just love the sound, the feel of that word on my tongue, obsequious. So I had to look it up, because I think it's like too, not humble, but servile, like going overboard to be humble. And I was thinking how this is sometimes how humility is difficult for us to understand, because we have this thing called false humility. So I started thinking about what is false humility, and I think it's feeding the face of ego, the lesser than face of ego.
Right.
So we put ourselves down, we self-deprecate, and it doesn't feel right to the listener or to the self, actually, because in a way what it is it's suppressed arrogance.
Yes.
So I have a feeling of being better than, and so I self-deprecate. Or as spiritual beings, I think, we've experienced what arrogance is, and we really don't like it, and we don't want to be arrogant. And yet we know that ego in us can still drive those kinds of feelings. And so almost as a compensatory mechanism inside, we put ourselves down because we don't want this to go up, or we've experienced it before and we don't want that for sure. And so we go the other direction without understanding that it's also feeding ego. Right? The lesser than or the more than is still ego. And I remember as a young person traveling, I always had the Canada flag on my backpack. And even now, as a pretty hardy traveler, somebody gave me the gift of the baggage tag that had the Canada flag on one side, and then I put the Brahma Kumari's logo in on the other side. But I was thinking, and I still have that. And why do I have that? Because sort of the statement isn't really, I'm Canadian. The statement is, I'm not the other. you know? And I was thinking about how in Canada we have this sort of, I hate to say it, and maybe people will take umbrage with this, but I've thought about that over the years a lot, you know, this pride to be Canadian, kind of saying I'm not that other, is a form of arrogance. It's like being arrogant about being humble. You know, we're better because we don't boast. We're better because we're quiet. And, you know, and I thought that's like a false humility and it doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
And because it's suppressive,
Yeah.
you know, so whether we do that as an individual or whether we do that as a nation, this false humility, I think, is what gives humility a bad rap, as you were saying earlier, Terry.
You know, another example of false humility is when someone really deserves praise and yet they won't accept it. They deflect it.
Mhm.
They deflect it everywhere else, thinking that's being humble, but really that isn't being humble. Because if I really have self-respect, then I accept that praise graciously.
I say
Right?
thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you,
I
and
think,
carry on.
yeah, and then you don't dwell on it.
No.
You don't hold it. You don't become prideful of it,
Right.
but you accept it.
Right.
You accept the praise.
That's-
And we don't fish for compliments, you know. When we fish for compliments, then we're trying to draw attention to ourselves. And so that's a false humility as well, I think,
yeah, that's a good one.
you know.
It's
We're telling people how humble we are. I'm really humble.
A bit of a paradox there too, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
It's interesting too, Terry, when you mention praise, because if you're praising someone else, the only way you can see those qualities, is that you have them in yourself, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, again, I mean, if it's from a place of self-respect, where you're saying, oh, I recognize these qualities in someone else because I know those qualities. But if you're praising someone without that recognition, then maybe there's a little, you know, I don't want to use the word deficit, but the self-respect isn't on really steady ground,
Mhm.
That's
right? I remember Sister Shivani, she was being introduced in one of her many, many videos. And, you know, she has a long list of amazing titles to her name. And when the presenter finished, she just very quietly said, the only reason you can say all of that about me is because those qualities are in you. And it was so beautiful. You know, she didn't say those aren't my qualities, but she just really made it clear, like, the reason you see that and you recognize it is because those are yours too. So it goes back to that, the beautiful point you made about soul consciousness just equalizes us all. And when you think about it, what else can do that? You know, what else takes all of the falseness of our identity away and just pars down to the way we are all the same, which is we are all souls. So it's, I just thought I'd bring that point up about praise, because there's false praise too.
There is, absolutely there is. You know, I was thinking about when you talked about being full, that humility it feels like a really full virtue. I in my reading today, there was a story, so, or maybe it's a parable, I don't know, but it's about a tree. So when a tree is full,
Mm-hmm.
very full, it will bow down, right, to give its fruit. But if it isn't full, it can't bow down. So that's the same as humility. I bow down to others when I am full, because I don't need others to bow to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I thought, wow, isn't that that really said it to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, you don't need anything when you're that full from anyone. Yeah.
That's right.
So it's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful energy, you know, to allow others to be where they need to be in that moment
Mm-hmm.
without any expectation. any attachment to them or to an outcome.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. If we could be more like that with each other, right? Just to be, just allow each other the space they need. Yeah.
And so, I did a lot of thinking about myself, and I thought, so I'm not an arrogant person. I'm not an arrogant soul. But am I humble? It's quite a question to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes maybe I am.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I am. But I know that there are times when I'm really not. And it's not that I'm arrogant, but I don't stand in my own self-respect. And as soon as I don't stand in my own self-respect, then I can't be humble. And, and then I thought, well, that's a wonderful way to be, and I need to learn how to do that more. And the only way I can do that is to really be inside. Like you said, the meditation, be within, know who you are, and have the faith that you will be successful, and that drama will be what drama is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just need to stand strong.
We're celebrating Dadi Prakashmani's day tomorrow, the day she left her body in what we consider to be her fully realized state. So it's a celebration for us, BKs around the world. We have lots of these celebrations, in part because our elders have all passed on, and each one of them has been such a good role model for us. And so we celebrate them. But, one of the things about Dadi that made her so special, I think, like all of our daddies, but especially her, is she was so humble. And yet she was always at the center of attention. She was always at the center because people gravitated towards her. And because, she was responsible for this organization as it was booming, just growing from, 1969 until today, which was massive. But she always put others first. And she understood that she needed to be in the center. So she would go and be with people. She would put herself in all of the gatherings with the people because she was being an instrument. And this idea of instrument consciousness, right? That it's not me doing it. It's happening through me. I, the soul, have willingly given myself, to be an instrument for God, and therefore lots of things will happen through me. She never took offense. That's another expression of ego, is to be sensitive and take offense, to be hurt, to be wounded. I've got some false then reputation that I'm trying to protect, which is again ego, right? But she was at the center of things, and so much happened because of her. And yet never did she had so much self-respect, but that, I don't know, and people would always say, thank you, Daddy, and Daddy did so much, and Daddy did this, and she was unfluffed by it. She didn't brush it off, but nor did she take it. She would always just say, either thank you, or, it was God, I'm an instrument. And so I think that's what protected her and protects most of us, is this idea that it's happening through me. And that my part is to be willing. My part is to be here. And so that way I don't claim the credit for anything. And yet what you were saying, Terry, about authority, I think the only thing that I have as an authority is the authority of my own experience.
Yes.
That's the only sort of authority I can bring. So it's not about what I know, even it's the experience that I've had is my authority. But I guess we're safe from not taking the credit for things. And yet the whole world is built around taking credit, I think, as Leela, you were saying earlier. Right. So it's a very different way to operate, is to think all the good things that happen happen through me, orchestrated, inspired, directed, guided, pure energy coming through. And in the same way, to not think, when you said, Tara, I am arrogant or I'm not arrogant, to always be thinking, I, the soul, am pure. If there's arrogance, it's a habit I've picked up on the way. But never to say, I am this, because I am not that.
Yes.
By definition, ego is not me. But running parallel, trying to make me think that's me.
That's right. Oh, yes, just runs right along beside.
Yeah, it's pretty close sometimes. But it's not me. It's not me.
That's right.
So it's there, but it's not me.
Judy, do you think Daddy Prakashmani's speciality of listening to those around her built her humility? That's always been something that's been shared about Daddy's ability to really include.
Yeah.
So she included all those around her, and that seemed to instantly build trust. Do you think that is an element of strengthening humility, or do you, again, I don't know if it's a relevant question, but I do know that's one of her specialities. She was able to really bring a feeling of cooperation among souls very quickly. So
yeah, I think so. And I think the ability to listen, the interest, the desire to listen to others is an expression of humility. I know when people start learning to facilitate, it's really helpful for them to understand that a teacher speaks 70% of the time and the students speak 30. But when you're facilitating, you speak 30 and the group speaks 70%. And even just that is a real shift. Oh, and I think, yes, I think someone who has that virtue wants to listen. And as you know, Daddy's mantra was stay in your self-respect and give respect to others. And that would be the expression of humility as we're speaking of it this evening. So yeah, I think so. Very much so. Great example for us.
yeah, it seems like cooperation is a natural result of humility. That people, that souls want to cooperate, and it just happens from that trust that gets built. We learned a bit about that, Terry, from the course we took about building trust in a group. Yeah, that if people see humility being expressed, then there's sort of a trust that just starts to get built into the group dynamic.
It's a good diagnostic, isn't it? If you're not getting cooperation, you could check your humility level.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a great way to think about it.
Because it's true. I think it's a byproduct. Cooperation is a product of humility, isn't it? Because without that, how could you lend yourself to a shared task, offer your cooperation to something if it wasn't on the basis of humility? That's a beautiful insight. Yeah. I'm going to open the chat boxes now, see if anyone has anything to either ask or comment. And feel free just to do that at any point, and I'll read them aloud. So Tara, anything about that? Daddy Prakashmani, for you, example, it's her day tomorrow. You've seen lots of images of her and heard stories. Anything connected to that for you around humility?
Well, I think that her humility led to this deep respect that everybody had for her. I mean, everyone knew she was there to serve them. And I think that's part of humility, is being a server and doing for others, and giving those souls what they need at that moment. And maybe it's to listen. Maybe it's to offer offer a piece of advice. and maybe it's to do something physically for that individual. And I think she always knew what that was, what that other one needed,
She was paying attention, isn't that?
because she
Right.
paid it.
Right. And that's the humility, is to feel that her role was to support others.
That's right. And not to, you know, and she just knew that if she did that, everything would work out okay. And it would, you know, it comes from a deep faith, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think an understanding that relationships are more important than tasks. Always relationships are more important than task. So if there's a good relationship, the task will get done like that. And so
Yeah.
she invested herself in the relationship of listening and supporting, like you're saying. Yeah.
And truly listening, like not listening to answer, right? But listening to understand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like there are so few really humble people in our world. The more we speak about it, the more I think, oh my, that's a tall order, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, we hope that our leaders have that quality, but I mean, we're not in those advisory meetings, right? We don't know if that's being done too. I mean, with Daddy, it felt like by listening, it fueled her decision-making power. You know, because she was administrative head, like she had enormous, constant responsibility to run this organization. So she was still making those decisions daily, you know, very important decisions, but she took the time to listen to those souls that she needed to gather together. And it seemed through that listening, then she was able to come to a really clear decision.
Well, and Daddy didn't often make the decision, right? And they would be in the gathering, as you're saying, and talk about it, and then they go around in a circle and talk about it again. And then they go around and talk about it again, which for many of us would have driven us crazy, right? But they did that until there was common, like till everybody either came on board, or if they didn't, Daddy would go and talk to them and ask what was the issue and were they not able. And if they were not able to support the decision, then the decision did not go that way. And even if it meant waiting until even a year, you know, or longer, until somebody realized, okay, this is the way to go, because Daddy understood unless people were with it, it wasn't going to work anyway. So a decision, imagine that. Imagine being in a way.
Extraordinary.
It's extraordinary, but her commitment to the relationships, you know, and the respect in the relationships was above and beyond task accomplishment always, and with a view to the long haul. I mean, they're going to be together, you know, forever. It's not like people get fired from this organization. You know, we're all here forever. Right. So you know, what an interesting way to work is to think that way, that the relationship is more important, and thus the humility in listening.
But then you think about what would have happened had, I mean, if she had made the decision, everybody would have done what she said.
Mm-hmm, they would have.
They would have done what she said without question, but then there would be dissent for those one or two that didn't agree.
And division.
And there would be division.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so how wise was she? So that's part of being humble, isn't it? Yeah. If everyone doesn't agree, then we can't move forward. We won't move forward.
And even making that statement and committing to it meant that everyone else could soften, because if you were in a fighting combative mode to get your way, and the leader says, well, until we all agree, you know, until everybody's on board, it's not that important. We will let this sit. And even really important things were not that important unless the group, you know, unless people could support it. By demonstrating that much respect for everyone, you could just see how the ego would soften. It's like it would just sort of lay down, and they'd go, oh, well, you know, let me rethink that. Or, I mean, and it wasn't just a strategy on her part. It was genuinely, she wouldn't proceed because she understood there would be divisions, which we didn't want.
Yeah.
In an organization of peace.
Yeah.
or it would have been just the same as everywhere else,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
Beautiful.
It's quite a commitment, isn't it?
Yeah.
To operate that way. It's breathtaking.
And the patience too that goes with that. Amazing as well.
Mm.
Wow.
And the letting go of any outcome. Like she would just know that it will happen in the right time.
Right,
And if it doesn't happen, it's not meant to happen,
right.
right?
So she never had to play any games. She never had to manipulate. She never controlled. She never got forceful. She didn't have to. She trusted. And what did she trust? She trusted God. She trusted, I think, the others and I think she really trusted the drama. She trusted life. It's like it will reveal itself what the right thing to do is. And until the time everyone can see that, it's not time for us to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't live in that kind of world right now. But I mean, she only left us 12 years ago. We've been in that world the whole time Daddy was here. And she just chose to operate that way. Quite amazing.
It is amazing.
Okay, chat box people, it's your moment. They're all there. Either we've covered it all, which is possible, or it's a bit of a tricky one to get your head around. Or, yeah, maybe there's nothing else to say. So anyways, invitation to type in the chat box anything you would like on the subject of humility. I feel like we've explored many wonderful avenues, pathways. Anything left untouched, the two of you, that has come up as we've listened to each other?
One of the quotes that I have here is that a sign of greatness is humility. And to the extent that you are humble, so you will automatically be great in everyone's heart. And that really talks about Daddy, doesn't it?
Mm. Right.
Without humility, you can't be a master and give happiness to everyone.
Winning hearts instead of winning what? Winning support, winning, all the political games that get played. Instead, it's winning hearts. So you win a heart through humility. Beautiful.
And humility easily makes you egoless. So trying to get rid of ego doesn't work, but filling yourself and being humble gets rid of ego. So I just thought that was a really nice refrain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Daddy Janky has many different definitions of humility, but one of them is to win your own heart, and then the heart of others, and of course the heart of God. So I thought that was nice to think about winning your own heart.
Say a bit more about that. How do you understand that? That's beautiful. Win your own heart.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's again the self-respect. If you really have respect for yourself, and know your heart as being clean and honest, then you've won your heart. So from there, I mean, I think again, humility is it's just a natural state when you're in your self-respect. Like you said, Terry, there's no pull to prove anything in any way, right? Now you still have to catch ego because it will still be slippery and try its strategies. But I think if you just stay, very steadfast in that place, and just allow humility to show up. It feels like that to me. It's not like you're consciously having to be humble. It's like humility will be there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
It's just practice. It's just practice. It's like all of these.
Coming back. It's coming back all the time to soul, right? It's coming back to soul consciousness and not getting lost in anything peripheral where ego plays its games.
Exactly.
Right? So maybe that's it. The humility is just there
Yeah.
when you come to that awareness. It's really nice.
I mean, I think we have to learn about ego, and we have to understand its many ways that it works in us, so that we can kind of catch it. And I think that's one aspect of becoming more soul conscious, right? Is to actually see when we're not, when we're trapped in body consciousness, and ego is a really good way we get trapped. So I think it's beneficial for us to know how ego works, but ultimately, you know, to have more and more experience of being soul conscious. And then ego can't really show up. If we're in that state of soul consciousness, ego can't be there. So it's both. It's a balancing game, right? Of doing both. But yeah, I mean, all these virtues, I mean, it's amazing to explore them, because you see all the tentacles of them and how they just really overlap and interweave with each other. And in the end, they feel like it's one blended ball of virtues. I love the virtue garden theme, right? It's like a garden. Yeah.
Right, and the root systems are all connected.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I have heard it said that if you really get good at, if you really study any one of the virtues, then it opens the doors to all the others. So it doesn't matter what one you enter with, but once you're into the garden, then they're all there, which I find very reassuring, you know, and that they all have companions. So if you're feeling you're not so good at one, then, you know, working on the others will eventually lead you to that one. You know, it's a cultivation in a way, because we know the virtues are all there, but I maybe don't use them all. I only use the ones that I feel like I'm good at or I'm used to, you know, and yet the other ones are there and waiting to be used. So that's why we had the series for the summer, is just to cultivate.
Absolutely. And I mean, I just think from our conversation tonight, you know, I feel like, oh, I want to explore humility more, because it feels like I don't know the whole realm of humility. I mean, I have experienced it, but I feel like, oh, there's so much to learn about it.
I think we're going to end with a meditation, and either of you, but Leela, it'd be lovely if you just did a little 2-3 minute for us. But I'm going to give everyone just one more chance if you wanted to say anything in the chat box before we go. If humility was a bird or an animal, what would it be?
Interesting.
I would say hummingbird, because it's ever so light. It doesn't leave any impact on anything.
I feel like it's soaring too, though. It's a bird that can soar, because it can step away from all the drama and just allow things to move.
Yeah, I was thinking an eagle, because an eagle goes so high. And
Yeah, I think an eagle.
clear vision.
Right.
That it can see what other birds can't, and it's the king of birds. So, you know, we're king of ourselves.
That's nice. That's what Suzanne said too. And Corey said swan. Isn't that lovely? That's lovely. Nice question.
Yeah.
People
Things
develop
like that.
team. Trust them for a good question. That's great. Thank you, guys.
You're going to laugh at this, but I was going to say an armadillo.
That's great.
You've got to be humble to be an armadillo.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
True.
I've seen them. They're painful.
And Tom says a horse. That's great. And Charmaine says the discussion fits with the Mi'kmaq view of an eagle as well. Yes, that's right. And you know that story of the eagle that has the crows pecking at him, and people say, why don't you shake them off or combat them? And the eagle says he just flies higher. and then the crows can't breathe, and so then they drop away. And that, I guess that's the story of how to deal with ego, isn't it? Is that we just fly higher, we get our consciousness up and up and up, so that we're not trapped in that mundane world, which is what ego is. Yeah, that's great. Great question.
Fun.
So Leela, would you like to thank you, everyone? Thanks for being here with us. We probably wouldn't have this conversation to the extent that we have had this evening had you not been there listening and subtle encouragement and support for us, but also as avid co-learners, you know, knowing that we're all learning as we explore together here. So thank you for all coming. I feel like I'm richer as a result of this evening. And so if you want to take us out with a 2 or 3 minute meditation,
Sure.
Leela, that'd be great. Thank you.
So we'll just get comfortable. You need to shift your body. And we'll just turn inward and really feel that still and silent place within. And know that that is your true self. And that's where all these beautiful virtues live. The garden of virtues within the self. And all these virtues are ours to grow and foster, to explore and express. They live within us. We can see them in ourselves, and we can choose to see them in others. And we can see both the power and the beauty of humility. How humility really is the foundation of our true self-worth, our true self-respect. And when we operate, when we have this consciousness of who we truly are, all the cousins of humility, such as grace, cooperation, truth, beauty, they all come forward like racing children, wanting to also be a part of our lives and the lives of others. And so we choose to spend a bit more time, a bit more energy focused on this virtue of humility as we go out into the week, knowing it's there in abundance within each of us. Om Shanti.